Hey guys, back at the Joshi Pod. Very happy to have back on the show again. This is like the third or fourth time you've been on, I think.
Something like that.
JD from the Red Leaf Retrocast. Welcome back to the Joshi Pod.
Hooray, I'm back. Good to be here.
So this is another one of my podcasts where I want my friends to be your friends. And JD does an amazing job on his podcast, and I want to have him on again to discuss wrestling and discuss his podcast again.
Hooray. I like this idea.
So, JD, what have you been doing recently on your podcast?
Oh, well, the same thing we've been doing quite a long time, actually, and that's we do retro wrestling. Since this is a wrestling podcast that I'm on here, I won't plug the video games or anime part.
No, please
plug
do.
the wrestling part.
No, please do. Please plug it all.
Well, it's the Red Leaf Retrocast. We do a lot of retro, hence the name. Basically, something that's more than 15 years old is kind of the rule that we go by. But we keep with all the modern stuff as well. A lot of topics. So for the wrestling side of things, the retro part is All Japan Women. We watch the classics, review the episodes, maybe something talking points after that. We just recorded and covered the retirement of one Chigusa Nagayo. You know, how she never returned from wrestling again that first time.
That's what I'm about to do with my podcast, bud. Retiring forever.
Yes, to never be on another podcast again. You will never do that, just like Chigusa Nagayo will never step into another ring after 1989.
So describe, I mean, Kay and I talked a little bit about it, just how popular Chigusa was. Explain to the people that maybe you don't know that what Chigusa's retirement looked like and how the reaction was from the fans.
Oh man, so it's very interesting because All Japan Women, they had that set rule that you had to retire at 25, 26 years old. And up until 1989, these classic episodes really show you how emotional these retirements were. And the joke we like to say from watching all these classic episodes now is that whenever we come across a wrestler, a woman, just the joke is now, oh, they're 25? Oh, they need to retire. They're old ladies. They're they're no good. They're washed up because that was the rule back in All Japan Women. So in the case of just All Japan losing all of their stars to this rule, when it came time for Chigusa Nagayo being the number one, clearly the number one fan favorite, biggest reactions, biggest crowd, she was kind of the spark that changed this rule for All Japan Women, and it also helps when you essentially create your own competition, and these women just clearly are not ready for retirement at 25, because as we know, 25 is not actually old.
I believe that very much now. When I was 19, I probably thought 25 was old.
Right. Yeah. Well, All Japan Women also thought that, apparently. But yeah, like before Chigusa's retirement, the one that really stuck out to me the most was Devil Masami. Not just because of how much I enjoyed her and how unique she was. She was just incredibly emotional about it all. And she just came across as this person just not ready to hang the boots up, right? Mm-hmm. And especially for someone at the top of their game like she was. And if you kind of just do a loose little research on her, she didn't stay retired very long. And she went to JWP and helped create the competition along with Jackie Sato, another All Japan star of the ages, right? And Chigusa Nagayo was not very far behind either, because when you're that popular and that good, and clearly wrestling means so much to you, you're going to do everything you can to kind of stay in the game. And it's no secret that she even kind of steps into it somewhat today still and has such a mark.
Yeah, it's the old-timey rules they had as far as retiring. You know, you think about the people now, if if that was still in play today, like what wrestlers we would not be seeing anymore, and what wrestlers have improved from 25 on. He got even better than they were, when they were, almost all of them are probably better at 25 than they were at 20,
Yeah, and I was thinking about this just the other day, actually, to go along with just our joke. Like, Mayu Iwatani is over 25, and she's arguably the number one current Joshi in the world currently. I mean, Tokyo Sports seems to agree with that. And just imagine, like, a year, because I believe she's 26, 27. Just imagine a year or two ago that she just had to hang it up. And she's going through probably the best part of her career the last couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
That's quite something to think about. I believe Takumi Iroha is above 25, if I'm not mistaken. She's one of the best in the world.
Look at Tsukasa Fujimoto.
She's approaching 40.
Arisa Nakajima.
Yes, all of these women. And it's interesting because if you look at the Stardom roster, a good chunk of them are under 25. And who's kind of the brains behind that operation? It's Rossi Ogawa, who was part of All Japan Women. But then you have Ice Ribbon. Yes, they have young people as well, but they don't have this rule where they're looking for people under 25. Because I believe you interviewed Yappy, and she kind of brought that to light, that a lot of these promotions just want to train people under 25. And it was tough for her to get in. But Ice Ribbon's like, nah, we don't go by those dumb rules over here. So that's how she got in. So it's interesting how some things carry over and are still leaving a mark on the business today.
Yeah, and you think as a business, they wouldn't want the women to leave at 25 because, I mean, you're printing money with Chigusa Nagayo.
Well, I mean, when you have this mindset in the 80s where women over 25 are no longer marketable and washed up, and you just got to move on with the next generation, you just don't know any better. It's a very fun learning experience to see how popular some people are, how much the style has changed over the years, because I started the All Japan Women's Classic episode started in 1983, and just going through the 80s like that, because a lot of people, when you think about, at least this is in my experience, just in the general social Joshi fandom, everybody harkens back to the 90s, right? The early to mid 90s, the Minami Toyota era, let's call it that, right? But I'm finding I found the 80s incredibly fascinating. Like, without Dump Matsumoto, for example, you would get no Bull Nakano. And I was not, like, I'd heard the name of some of these women, like Devil Masami, Dump Matsumoto, but I didn't know. And seeing their journey really enlightened me to how not just popular they were, but how important they were to just women's wrestling. It just kind of it's something that gets overlooked, I feel.
You know what's interesting, when I talk to the women wrestlers now, when I do the interviews, most of them watched men's wrestling. They weren't influenced by women's wrestling.
Yes, like Dragon Gate.
Yeah, like there's a generation after the 90s, those, the early 2000s, was the the death period for Joshi wrestling. And yeah, a
lot of wrestling, some would say.
Yeah. But yeah, almost to a person, everyone I've talked to about, did you watch growing up? Did you do this? I'm like, oh, I watched, Dragon Gate's one of them, and New Japan. None of them really say, I watched Stardom, or I watched this, or I watched that. It's all men's wrestling.
Yeah, I mean, I read an interview with Suzu Suzuki how she watched death matches.
Yeah,
I was like, oh, that sounds like a big Japan fan, and it's funny how you can track some people's fandom in way different ways. And yeah, we're definitely in a generation where, at least just from 2000 onwards, women wrestling it kind of disappeared in one way or another. And it wasn't until, let's just put 2011 as the number when things started coming back into the spotlight.
What do you think killed Joshi wrestling for a while? What do you think was that ended the hot streak that it was on?
Oh,
you're a better historian than I am.
Well, Kay has done a lot of research on that from the Big Egg Joshi podcast. Perhaps you've heard of him. Yeah, I mean, you go through. I mean, that's a very complicated answer. It's always booking and management. That seems to be always a big deal when it comes to promotions. WCW, a promotion we've watched quite a lot of, has a lot to deal with that. But yeah, your basic research will tell you that All Japan Women made some bad investments in real estate. That's kind of a big one. Losing stars. I mean, that's a huge deal. That's a huge blow. Losing Chigusa Nagayo again was that huge blow to a good chunk of their audience. They no longer could draw the same amount of women that they used to. Kind of puts into perspective how important just a singular star is.
Okay, I'm going to go to my Stardom is WWE argument again.
Okay, totally fair. Absolutely understand. Shoot.
So, are they building a product where it's about the company's stardom and not their top stars?
Well, I do see what you're asking here. Like, I have seen the argument WWE is more about the product itself rather than the wrestlers.
Yeah,
right. You're building. You know, it's for the greater good.
It's like the circus or the Globetrotters or whatever. You know.
Sure, you're not like, who remembers the point guard on the Globetrotters, but you remember the Globetrotter team name, right? Yeah, I mean, you could make the argument a lot of these promotions, like Oz Academy, is only about Mayumi Izaki. Is Stardom only about one person? No, I can't say that's a bad thing, to be honest. You do want some name recognition out there for your promotion, and for a while there, Stardom was all about Io Shirai, right? And I guess you could throw Kairi Hojo in there to an extent, but it was mostly Io Shirai. And then when she lost her, they kind of had to make their own new identity. And a lot of that is building around young talent and focusing on what they do best. And that's the in-ring element of it. And I say, as of right now, in its current set after the Io Shirai period, yes, it is more about trying to build their brand up to higher recognition. Is that the same as WWE? No, because Stardom is making new stars. It's just a slower process, right? Mayu Iwatani can't do it alone, so they're making new stars. It's very clear. You got your Momos, despite what I joke about with her being in the mid card to people. But yeah, they got Julia, who's clearly making a mark on the industry. They used to have, rest in peace, Hana Kimura. She was a huge star in the making.
I think she could have been their Hulk Hogan.
Absolutely, she could have. We all saw it. It was like, when you hit gold on a wrestler, and you just know they resonate with the audience, it's going to happen. And Arisa Hoshiki had to retire in 2020. God, 2020 has been rough on Stardom. And that's the other thing. It's been a rough 12 months on Stardom in some form of fashion. So they gotta do some rebuilding. They went out and got some free agents to kind of fill those voids, and they're rebuilding.
And I'm not criticizing for them to build around multiple people and not have one big star, to build around the company versus building around the star. I'm not completely against that. The WWE is more successful than ever doing that. So, and Stardom is more successful than ever, I think, kind of doing that as well. So again, I'm not criticizing. I'm just talking about the business model more than criticizing.
Well, I would argue that Stardom is being more successful than WWE in the sense that you can see stars being made currently in Stardom. You can't say that about WWE. Current Google Trends has Stardom marked as the #2 promotion in Japan that includes the men in its current state. You can look up WrestleNomics for that. You can tell that their attendance has actually increased during the coronavirus period, which is actually quite remarkable when you compare year-over-year attendance ratings. So they are building. They're trending up, is what I'm trying to say. And you can pick apart whom is going up above the others in a totem pole. Tommy won the 5-star recently, right? Julia won the white belt. They are making their new stars. They're putting them in prime top positions. They are giving them the focal point. Now, someone like a Jungle Kiona, whom resonates with, say, Western fans, may not resonate the same with the people in Japan. Maybe that's why some wrestlers aren't getting pushed over others. Maybe we expect something else as fans. But you got to remember to kind of take a step back and see kind of the bigger picture of things. And right now it's Utami, Julia, Mayu, of course, and you can throw probably another couple names in there and see who sticks and see who rises and see who Stardom gets behind, and hopefully that resonates with you.
Do you see anybody from that group as the transcending star that can, that I thought Hana was going to be? She was the total package. I think she's hard to compare to. But do you see somebody else that could like step up and be that person with the personality and the in-ring skill and the look and being the total package to be the top person in, it's going to be you're the top person in Joshi wrestling if you're the number one in Stardom.
Well, I think the idea behind signing Shuri to Stardom is their kind of Arisa Hoshiki replacement.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's tough to kind of do a one-to-one comparison like that. Obviously, you can't just replace a Hana Kimura with another one. You can't replace a Kagetsu with another one.
Yeah.
They're one. Everyone is supposed to be unique to each other. Now, do I think someone has the charisma of Hana currently in Stardom? I think that's the hole that needs to be filled.
Yeah.
I don't think they've done that yet. I think someone needs to step up. Could someone like a Saya Kamitani fill that? Could be. I think it's too early to tell. Could someone with the in-ring killer kind of martial arts instinct that Arisa had? I think Shuri's is filling that pretty well with their recent Yokohama main event she had against Mayu.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was kind of the defining factor for me as a fan. It's like, hey, Shuri's here to stay. Am I bummed out that she won't be in Ice Ribbon anymore? Sure, but I'd rather her be more prominent in one promotion than a bit role across 5.
Mm-hmm. So going back, you're watching stuff from the 80s. Who from the 80s would you like to pluck and put in a time machine and bring to now to be part of the current Joshi wrestling scene?
I mean, it would be very interesting to see how the scene would react to a Dump Matsumoto stabbing women with scissors and making them bleed all over the ring. I guess Mayumi Uzaki to an extent does that now, but she's in her 50s and it doesn't quite land the same when you have a terrifying 24-year-old doing that to 19-year-olds.
See, I think that's one thing Stardom is missing is a monster.
I agree. I going back and watching a lot of the classics, you definitely see there was a super heel,
mm-hmm.
right? There was the Dump Matsumoto, there was Bull Nakano, there was Monster Ripper, if you want to even go back further than that. Even to an extent, Devil Masami was she was big and she was mean. Now, Monster Ripper of the time was, I would say, meaner, hence the name Monster. But yeah, there was a big domineering heel to always be the antithesis to your big baby face. Dump was for Chigusa, Devil Masami, and Monster Ripper to Jaguar Yokota. Bull Nakano to Aja Kong. You name it. What is missing in Stardom? Yes, I would agree. Obviously, I don't think this is a controversial statement. Natsuko is not that answer. She's 9, 10. Never been really pushed. She's the top. She's supposed to be the leader of the heel faction, but it's just a DQ machine. It's not a domineering heel, right? You don't see her cutting people up and scaring children, right? That's not happening.
I think Yoshiko could have been that if things had gone differently.
Absolutely. I think, which is funny because she's now the top babyface in Seedling, but
yeah. She's the top babyface in Japan right now.
Yeah, it's really funny. Yeah, she does fit that role. But that is something I think is really missing in Joshi wrestling is this idea of a heel, a super heel, a dominant bad guy.
Somebody that wants to be mean. Somebody, that's, mean. Be mean.
Well, we could look at it from kind of their own business perspective, though, right? Back then, and still to an extent today, people make their money on merchandise, right? At least the wrestlers do. Merchandise, their connection with fans. And heels don't sell as well as being a babyface. Nobody wants to be that heel. No one wants to lose their income, right? And over the years, with Joshi wrestling and women's wrestling just not being as popular from the 80s and 90s heyday, that's a big risk to do, right?
Yeah. No, I understand that point, but yeah, it's just I would like to see somebody want to be mean, and I think that would help themselves and the company in the long run if somebody just went all in on being mean.
Well, what's sticking out to me right now, if we're just pulling from the recent, is the Dark Maya, the dark snow character of Maya Yuki and Ice Ribbon showing up.
Mm-hmm.
She's taken the character from Oz Academy, which still has that very old school mentality to it all, for better and definitely for worse. A lot of times, she's shown up with her whip, their dark demeanor, and she's challenging the big babyface Risa Sera for her title. And Risa Sera has been proven to not be afraid of blood. She may, in fact, love it a little too much at times. But that could be something. Like, Maya's proven to be a draw and a big star for the promotion. Maybe she can take a risk and be a big heel and move people up. Maybe. It's very possible.
So I'm sitting in front of my Joshi wall where I have all these autographed pictures of the wrestlers, and they all look like models. They all look pretty. The only one I'm afraid of on my wall is Miyako Matsumoto. She's the only one that scares me. The rest of them are just pretty girls.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's something that you just don't. It's very noticeable.
Yeah, and I'm a man, and I like to look at pretty girls, but I also like to look at the monsters beat up the pretty girls sometimes, and it's part of the story. It's a horror movie, it's an adventure movie. It's all those things, And again, I think it's one thing that Joshi wrestling's missing right now.
I agree. And if you want to go a little bit further back, Io Shirai kind of had that role to an extent with Queen's Quest, right? She was the dominating bad guy to Mayu, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what got Mayu over even bigger was having that antithesis to her. And people talk about the Thunder Rock feud being one of the best in women's wrestling the last, 15, 20 years. And that's for good reason.
Yeah, and maybe I'm thinking out loud here while we talk, is, maybe it's less being a monster and more being violent, because you watch some of that old stuff, the stuff you're watching, it's just violent. Some of it's just,
very violent.
Yeah, but you can be violent without being that violent, because if you're a little bit violent now, I think that would stand out from a lot of the other wrestlers. And I'm not talking about putting skewers in heads and, slamming light tubes and stuff, but just hitting hard. And, it's maybe this is just, I'm an old man now, and it's just wrestling in general. It's more cool moves than beating each other up.
Don't necessarily agree with that. Just sticking with women's wrestling, a lot of it's missing in the West for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Western women's wrestling, I think, in 2020 has proven to be in very rough shape. While in Japan, I think it's actually getting better. The wrestlers are getting back to a much higher level than they used to be over the last 15, 20 years. I don't think that's disputable. When you have Kaori Yoneyama being former HAW champion, then you look at today's roster, you're like, she shouldn't be champion. Like, well, that's probably a good thing. It means it's gotten better. But the point is, like, I was watching. I like to keep up with Impact Wrestling. Okay, let's use this as an example. It's regarded as the quote unquote top women's wrestling in outside of Japan. But when was the last time you heard on the grapevine a top women's match coming out of there? It doesn't happen.
Mm-mm.
And when you see those wrestlers that have had tours in Japan, they're not high on the card. Like, Deonna Purrazzo's not walking into the 5-star Grand Prix and possibly winning it. Right?
Mm-hmm.
You see Toni Storm doing that. And where's Toni Storm now? Barely featured on any sort of television. Why? Well, she's a good wrestler, absolutely. She connects with the crowd. That's not what the West is looking for, I guess. It's kind of why I have these high hopes behind AEW and what they're trying to do. It's clearly a long and frustrating process for fans. I'm definitely one of them. I'm frustrated that overnight they can't just be a successful women's promotion, right? I love Hikaru Shida, but she needs help. You can't do it alone.
Yeah, and I've said this before. I kind of give them a little bit of a pass on that because who knows who they would have brought over in 2020 if COVID hadn't happened.
Well,
I think Jamie Hayter would be there right now.
it's possible. Who knows what would have happened with B. Priestley? She definitely has some qualities of a heel that could do some work. Could Yuka Sakazaki have helped the TJPW women? Could they have had a bigger impact in bringing Joshi to the West? Mm-hmm. And what has been AEW's focal point is the in-ring, right? They want to bring a host of different styles and they want to change the world, right?
I think Maki Ito would have been in America and blown up and been a giant star.
I think so as well. She has a crowd connection, and Mei Suruga is a great example. Mm-hmm. I think as soon as the borders open up again, kind of a full-time basis, Mei Suruga and Emi Sakura and company, they're all coming back to the West, and they are going to explode.
I so badly want to put a Choco Pro show on in WrestleMania weekend if it's in LA next year.
It would be fun.
I want to find a way. I want to find a way to do it. So you talk wrestling. You said you also talk anime and other things as well. Let us hear about that part of your podcast.
Oh, I mean, the whole podcast began as a retro gaming one. I love retro gaming. I love gaming in general.
Okay, explain to me what retro gaming means.
So, what was the first video game console you had?
Atari 2600.
Well, we play some of those games on the cast.
Then I had a Commodore 64.
Yeah, we so it's kind of it's a hard set rule. Everyone has a different definition of like what an antique is, what retro is. So we just have our little rule that if it's over 15 years old, we consider it retro. So that's the same thing with the anime cast. We can review an anime of the past if it's at least 15 years old from today's date. You know, it's late October, so 15 years ago it qualifies. So we do that for anime, and then the retro gaming. So obviously we're not playing like Xbox One or 360 games on there. It's because it's not 15 years old yet. But we each pick a theme. So our most recent episode upon recording was over bad tutorials. So we that was my theme pick. And so the person who picks the theme picks 2 games based on the theme, and then the other hosts pick 1 game, and then we all kind of demo it, play it for a little bit. I've made it a mission to try to like beat at least one of these games for each podcast every couple weeks, and we just talk about the retro games of based around that theme. Like, why do you think Final Fantasy VIII has terrible tutorials? Well, they have a major system in the game that they don't explain, and it's pertinent to going through it.
So you keep saying we. Who are some of the other people you have on the podcast?
So they're different hosts for every podcast. Actually, they're all just kind of friends I've made over the years. Best friend grew up in Texas. He's on there with me. A friend in Canada when I was working there, made friends with him. He's on the Retro Gaming podcast. The anime one is just over the years made friends just online. So a couple people, one's from Brazil, one's from Norway. So we've got different cultures and international flavors to everyone's opinion. It is all in English. Don't you worry. Even though it sounds like all of us speak different languages, it is all in English. So we keep that consistent. And then Kay, I for a time I've done the wrestling one solo at times, but Kay, as a recent addition, he's been doing the whole wrestling podcast with me. And my mom joins me for AEW reviews and watches some other promotions every now and again.
Those are spectacular. You guys need to listen to those.
Yeah, my mom became a women's wrestling fan finally after watching an Ice Ribbon show of all things.
It makes sense to me.
Yeah. She hated women's wrestling. Hated it. She's like, it's not feminine enough. It's shouldn't be doing that. Then I took her to a wrestling show and there was intergender with Chris Statlander and she was like offended, but yet I was like, Mom, you were cheering in the crowd like everybody else. Wow, that's not true.
See, my dad was the one when I was growing up. My mom loved wrestling. My dad didn't like it, but he would always walk by and just peek at it every once in a while. And then I took him to his first show was a couple years ago, or might have been 2 years ago. I took him to his first show in 40 years, and he had the time of his life going to an indie show for the first time in 40 years.
Wow.
So let's talk about my favorite game that I ever played was NHL PA 94 on the Sega Genesis.
Ah, yes.
Have you guys covered that one quite yet?
We've covered NHL 95, I believe.
That's a good one too.
And if I'm not mistaken, I believe for sports games we covered NHL 94 back in episode, had to be in the 50s. We did a whole sports theme episode where we covered like Mario Tennis and NHL 94.
So my buddy and I were playing Sega Genesis. We're playing, what was it, like Tommy Lasorda Baseball or something like that.
Oh, I love that one.
And my buddy and I, we still talk to this day. And this is when it was out and it was hot. And one of I'm a Padre fan, so I was playing the Padres. He's a Padre fan too. I can't remember who he was playing, but this guy named Tim Tuffle, who's got no power at all. My buddy Joe and I are playing a 7-game series, and it's like the 7th game of the series. And Tim Tuffle with no power, I hit a home run off his best pitcher to win the World Series, and he got so pissed at me for that.
Changed the controller out.
Oh yeah, it was
system
awesome.
Turned off. Nah, that never happened.
we joke about that to this day. Isn't it cool though that video games and stuff and wrestling can conjure up memories like that from 20-something 30 years ago?
Absolutely, nostalgia plays a hell of a role. That's kind of what the Retrocast is. I like to do it for not just for that reason. I like to learn about the past, and I do compare the past to the present quite a lot, especially like current games I'm playing. Like why does this game Dynamite Heady on the Sega Genesis that I've never heard of prior to covering it on the podcast way back when? Why does that resonate with me so much? And I don't know, Call of Duty on modern consoles. Why doesn't that do it for me?
How often do you and your co-host disagree on the quality of games?
Oh, quite a lot. There's a huge joke about this console called the 3DO.
I've heard of it.
So when I was living in Canada, I saw this system and I was like, I don't know what this is. It's from Panasonic. And I got it. And this has the most bizarre games on it I've ever experienced. And it's all like, most of them are FMV, and 9 times out of 10, I've made it a mission that every time we pick a theme, I will pick a game on the system. Like, I am determined to find something good on this thing. And I'm like always trying to hype up this game. Like, no, it's actually kind of good. You just got to, cheat or, okay. So what if the game doesn't tell you what to do or the controls are terrible? There's a good game in there. They're like, no, the 3DO is shit. The whole console is bad. Anything on it is terrible.
Are you old enough to remember arcades?
Yeah.
Okay. I wasn't sure.
I think I was, Eric.
I'm not sure how old you are. I never asked that question to anybody. So, but yeah, because I was an arcade kid. I was like, hardcore arcade kid, and even like the front of the grocery store, my mom would like just leave me there with some quarters and watching.
Oh man, I grew up in the bowling alley. There's always arcades in a bowling alley.
Oh yeah. So yeah, it's amazing to think now that the games we played in the arcade are just garbage compared to what, the kids are playing these days. The kids have like 1080p and all kinds of high def and 4K probably. With is it the PS5's 4K?
It will be, yeah.
That's amazing. Hey, one of the cool things I do want to bring up to you is you talk about meeting people online and having friends that you meet. And one of the cool things about doing the podcast was being able to get to meet a bunch of you guys, like you and Kay and Jay and JPQ and a bunch of you guys, and
we are all in the Discord watching wrestling and playing games.
No, but people like to crap on the internet and this and that kind of stuff about being a toxic environment. But I do want to say, though, as well, that, it also brings people together, like-minded people together in enjoying each other's company virtually. It's nice to be around people, but it's also nice to have that pleasant experiences online as well to to get to meet people that you would have met if the internet in Twitter and social media wasn't there. I think it needs to be said more often. People talk about the toxicity of social media and the internet and stuff, but there's good out there too. I got to meet you, so I'm very happy that I did this podcast for not just, I mean, if I take a step back when it's all said and done, and it's just meeting guys like you, which I really appreciate about the whole process of what we've done together.
Yeah, I mean, without modern technology and the internet, wouldn't be able to have the hosts from all over the world just talk random shit with me all the time.
So, JD, let us know one more time about your podcast and where we can find you on social media.
Yeah, so since this is the wrestling podcast, the Joshi podcast, I do the Red Leaf Retrocast. You can find it Anchor, Spotify, anywhere you find podcasts. Whoa, that was loud. Anywhere you find podcasts, YouTube channel with the whole backlog of everything. Again, the wrestling one, we do All Japan Women Classics. We do New Japan through the 90s Classics. Currently just finished 1993, Old New Japan. We do cover a little Old Japan in there as well. WCW Nitro. We didn't start from the beginning. We started 98. We just finished 98. Now we're at 99. We just finished the Finger Poke of Doom. We're getting ready for Sold Out 1999. Rest in soul. Rest in peace to my soul. I'm already losing my mind. But we also do the modern stuff. So I've been covering Ice Ribbon since I discovered it a few years ago. We do Stardom, do Seedling, Tokyo Joshi Pro. Kay likes Actress Girls, so he brings it up. So we talk a lot about that, and I like doing, I like doing what I like. If I don't like WWE, I'm not going to cover it. I'm not going to spend, 30 minutes shitting on it. I like watching DDT, having fun. I talk AEW with my mom. I do Dragon Gate. So I'm glad. I kind of take pride in the fact that we cover promotions that don't get a lot of the spotlight, especially Ice Ribbon. That's kind of one I'm super proud of that we do.
Yeah, Ice Ribbon's so good. That's what I tell people. Stardom is your gateway drug, but wait till you find Ice Ribbon.
Yeah, be happy with pro wrestling.
That's right. So, okay, one last question. I asked you about, taking an old wrestler to modern day. Which modern day wrestler would work best back in '83?
Why does I think Shuri comes to mind with her more shoot style.
Mm-hmm.
I think, and she can do ground game, more kicking. I think she would, but 83, that's very interesting because that's when it was a lot of still more ground based and they were still trying to break through to a lot of different things. So who's the best all around in-ring performer like a Jaguar Yokota? I can't say Mayu because that's a lot of Lucha Libre, Dragon Gate style in there. Shuri really comes to mind. Tsukasa Fujimoto with her heavy fundamentals, I think would nail it without question.
See, the first one popped in my mind was Arisa Nakajima.
I'd probably peg her for the late 80s, early 90s for some reason. That kind of pops into my head with her particular style.
I think she could be mean if she wanted to be mean.
Oh, that I don't doubt. Maybe she's too pretty for the early 80s. Not saying that Tsukasa Fujimoto, and yeah, you know what I mean.
I know.
I'm thinking more of just the all around simplistic style to it, but who would still have mass appeal. Maybe Arisa would. Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. All right, JD. Again, thank you so much.
She can actually stab people.
Yeah.
Sakushi, that jerk. She would fit.
I'm trying to get that to catch on, the jerk thing, but it hasn't caught on yet. So
Queen of Jerk style.
There you go. Oh, it's a t-shirt. JD, again, thank you so much for being on the podcast. And yeah, guys, follow him. He's a great guy. He puts on some great podcasts as well. So he does Joshi right. So you guys should give him a listen.
Oh, thank you. It was good for me to be on. You're welcome.
Thanks, buddy.
Thanks.